Texas Chainsaw, in my opinion, is one of the best games of 2023. They have really done a good job with authenticity and giving some of the power and slight edge to the killers as opposed to when it first came out, where victims could pretty much just do whatever they wanted. And so while victims can still be successful in the game with a slight edge to killers, overall, the health of the game is pretty good. And they're always trying to do things to fix the game. And even though it takes longer than what some of us hope for, there's still some things that need to be done. But what I thought would be interesting is if we look at the most successful asymmetrical horror game out there in Dead by Daylight and see what TCM can take from Dead by Daylight to not only be successful right out of the gate, but for long-term success over the next couple of years and beyond. So whatever your opinion is of my opinion, leave that down below after the video. And of course, I'd love to hear your ideas as well. What do you think TCM can do to kind of, push the bar? And in my opinion, they've raised the bar to an extent, but also keep that bar and keep the base players they already have. Make sure you leave those things after the video. And if you like what I do, consider subscribing. First things first is content. So when Dead by Daylight came out, it was less than 2 months after that, they released a new killer, new map, new victim. That was the Halloween series. Now, Dead by Daylight is not tied to a single IP, and I think this is important on both sides of the argument. So while they have the creative freedom to make up their own killers, which Texas Chainsaw does to an extent as well, they have more freedom to just do that stuff. And they can bring in recognizable characters that we know and love from certain horror movies. They just dropped one today for a new Chucky that's coming out November 28th. They've had Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, Bubba from Texas Chainsaw, Ghostface, Hellraiser, and all of their original characters as well. But the point is, it seems like every quarter, so 4 or 5 times a year, there's a new map, a new killer, new victims always being dropped into the game. And this is one area that TCM has been criticized probably more than any other thing, honestly, including myself, because I kind of felt like, if you release the game, make sure you have a plethora of good content followed behind the release, so that way you're keeping people interested. And so while it's easier said than done, me sitting in my chair talking to y'all about this, I still know what I want, and y'all know what you want, and it's always related to new content and free content at that. And so it kind of sucks that the only content that we've gotten between launch and now, up to this point, has been paid content. Now we know there's a new map coming, but that map has been leaked since like 3 days after the release of this game, of the full game. So, it's like, why are these things taking this long? Now, I'm kind of under the impression that, hey, listen, they're obviously a smaller studio. Things are going to take a little bit longer. But, in preparation for this game coming out, you almost feel like they did have a new map, but somehow it's taken a little bit longer. Now, from what they say, because they're always talking back and forth with the community, which is a good thing, on Twitter and Instagram and all that, is that they're trying to get the core base of the game as strong as possible so they can have bigger updates in the future. But it is a path they should follow because Dead by Daylight does a really good job at introducing new content into the game. And they do this consistently. Now, was DBD like perfect right out of the gate? Absolutely not. But they've continued to update the game. And I think that's something TCM can follow. And while I'm not like totally, screw TCM, I'm going to play Dead by Daylight, I'm still with the game. I'm going to stick with it because it's just a fantastic, awesome experience. But at the same time, they really have to release some new content and get that stuff out quickly. One argument I would make, because they are tied to a single IP, is that, yeah, they may be restricted in some of the things they can do, but just like with their killer Johnny and Sissy, they were able to come up with certain things, certain characters, whether that be from Kim Heichel or from just serial killers that they have researched in the past to be able to come up with those characters. And they can do the same thing here. Now, even though I love how authentic the game is, I don't necessarily care if all of the new killers and all the new victims and all the new maps especially are tied in at all with the 1974 film. I mean, we kind of expect that they won't be from this point going forward. So, yeah, while they might have a little less creative freedom because they are tied to that IP, still at the end of the day, I'm sure there's no set rules that says, hey, it has to be used in accordance to the 74 film in order for us to put it in there. Otherwise, we're just going to scrap it. They are going to go for an authentic experience. They're going to try to tie these things in the best they can, but we've already seen them make up characters, Black Nancy, Johnny, Danny, and others. And so, hopefully they will continue to kind of push this stuff out. And what I'm really hoping for is, since they've gotten the base structure of the game really strong and the balance of the game kind of worked out for the most part, hopefully we'll get more consistent updates with new content, new maps especially. Another thing that Dead by Daylight has is a training mode, and so this allows you to kind of learn the experience. Now, there's a lot more that goes into Dead by Daylight than what I kind of thought there was, to be honest with you. I mean, there really is. There's your blood webs and all your perks and stuff like that. I mean, there's looping and tunneling, and there's a lot of different things you have to learn in the game, but for the most part, it's a fairly simple game, I think, to get the grasp of compared to TCM. And TCM doesn't have any kind of training mode. You're just kind of thrown right in. And so I think they could benefit by doing something similar that Dead by Daylight has in introducing, bots into the game. And so that will allow you to kind of get the grasp. You can get hints as you go along. Hey, this is something you need to do as a victim or a killer. And hopefully, that can teach new players coming in, and they won't feel so overwhelmed when they come into the game as a new player. Another thing that Dead by Daylight does, and TCM I don't think is any different really in this regard, is listening to what the community wants. And so by taking ideas from fans. So I read a story about when they introduced the Huntress in Dead by Daylight. This is part of a European scary story that parents tell their children. And so the song she hums is the songs that kids in Europe heard growing up. And so it kind of freaked them out. And so while we may have not gotten that in the United States and other places, still it was a kind of a cool way to, honor the kids in Europe and give them something truly scary they can remember their childhood based off of. When I did a little bit of research on Dead by Daylight and how they come up with ideas, they are truly immersed in what the fans want and offering a really scary and immersive experience. And so in that front, I really respect that. And I think that's something that TCM could probably implement as well, doing some fan ideas and within reason and respect to the TCM community and movies at large. And we've been talking about this as well for months and introducing additional licenses to the game. I think the 2003 remake would be a fantastic one to bring in. You have plenty of Leatherface skins there that you could work with, a brand new family house you could work with. So all in all, I think expanding upon this universe is going to be crucial to the long-term success of Texas Chainsaw. Another thing is getting into lobbies. Now, a lot of this obviously is dictated by the amount of players they have. From what I've noticed, if you play as a family member, you can get into lobbies very quickly. If you play as victims, still, even after this last update, it takes a lot longer, considerably longer, to get into a game. This is something they're going to have to address, because there are times where you get into a game as a victim and you get killed right off the rip. I've done it to people, and it's happened to me. And so, that really sucks when you wait 2, 3, 4 minutes to get into a match and get killed instantly. Now, one thing about Dead by Daylight is you definitely feel like you have more of a chance as a survivor. You have to be hooked 3 times essentially, before you're sacrificed to the entity. So one thing that they could do when we tie that into, how victims, can essentially be one-shotted in the game, and I play family main most of the time, so I'm looking at it from both sides. But one thing you could do is have a mode where you get hooked, because Leatherface obviously does that, and then you could be revived or, taken off of the hook by the other victim. So you could have a separate game mode just for that experience alone, whatever they would call that. I think that might be a good thing as well. Another thing they could do is additional game modes. I talked about this before, where they could do like, protect grandpa, where he spawns in at, various random places throughout the map. They wouldn't have to give us new maps, but it would just kind of change the dynamic of the map. Victims try to attack, killers try to defend, and, that's the whole idea of the game, defend grandpa. They could do a nightmare mode where there's no perks for survivors or killers. They could do a hardcore mode where it's one killer versus 4 survivors. All of these different game modes would keep the game fresh, and they wouldn't have to necessarily come out with new maps, although that's going to be necessary to the long-term investment and, people coming back to the game. But regardless, this is something you could do inside of the game to keep it interesting and keep it fresh at the same time. Now, another thing I thought about, which would be cool, is if they did like a no exits mode. So essentially, the whole idea is for you to hide, and that's it. And so you have like a tier system. Let's say, the first 5 minutes, you got the basement. You get out of the basement gets closed off. But then as you move along throughout the map and different maps are sectioned off and then maybe closed off, you could then, keep it fresh. And almost like you're closing in on zones on like a war zone or a battle royale experience in a way. And the whole idea of the victims is to out survive or out hide the killers, for 20 minutes or whatever the case may be. So that's another maybe cool possibility that they can do. And I'm just kind of throwing stuff out there. This is stuff that I've kind of thought about, and maybe just different modes altogether. Now, something 100% Texas Chainsaw has over Dead by Daylight is the ability to do a story mode. This, you already have the story right in front of you. Maria Flores, Ana Flores, Danny, who's Maria's boyfriend. You have the other survivors that happen to go along with him, and you follow a Texas Chainsaw traditional story, and boom, there you go. Different locations that we already know in multiplayer. Somehow, that ties into the story. We end up at the family house. Now we have to get out of the family house. And so, I think incorporating some kind of a story into this, even if it's 6 or 8 hours long, you already have the base right there. And you already have the secret to a successful story mode by using what Texas Chainsaw already provides with iconic characters and the victims that are already in the game with the lore behind the story and what drives the game already. So TCM at its base, at its core, is a fantastic experience. I just think these are some of the things they could take from Dead by Daylight and some of the things they already have basically right in front of them that they could incorporate into the game. Love to hear your opinions down below. What do you think about my ideas, or maybe some of the ideas you have that would make TCM not only successful in the short term, but in the long term as well? If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See y'all in the next one. And as always, hold them down.